Okay, so I think that the our meeting is ready to start. So can we have our vice chair start us, please? Vice chair, are you able to start?
That's Sue.
Yes.
Right, Sue?
There we go. Sorry, I unmuted me, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So we assume perhaps Charles will be joining us, but if not, this is Sue Johnson. And I will go through the roll. And if you will, as your name is called, unmute yourself and say here and then remute yourself. So Charles Adkins. No. Vicky Doorway.
Here.
Thank you. Greg Campbell.
Here.
Sue Johnson. Here. Demba Balda.
Here.
Mary Rollins.
Here.
Ben Breeden.
Present.
Samantha Hassan.
Here.
Susan Massart.
Here.
And how do you say your last name?
Mosshart.
Oh, Masshart. Okay.
Thank
Got
you.
it. Okay. Larissa Knopp.
Here.
Kathy Lynott.
Here.
Did I hear you? Okay, thank you. So all present except Charles. And next we will have an overview of the procedure. So again, as we go through, when it's time for discussion, I'll call on you one at a time. And if you have a comment, when it's your turn, you can give the comment. When we've run through the whole list of people, I'll ask if there's any additional comment, at which point then you could let us know if you had an additional comment or question. We will listen to the entire presentation before we go to the comment stages.
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
This is Becky McCrary. Charles just entered the meeting.
Okay,
Hi, Charles.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I had to uninstall and reinstall my Teams.
So we're basically on number 3.
Okay.
Well, and actually we just went through 3, so
Right.
we would be ready for Canberra to start, and then Charles, I assume you'll take over as chair at this point if you want to, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take over. So,
Okay.
Kimbra, if you want to just go over the introduction of the CARES funding.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I am also going to ask that we have all participants mute mics, and also make sure to position yourself in the appropriate headroom and clearance all around. So just for our viewers at home. So with that, I will go ahead and move forward. So this is the April 23rd meeting of the Citizen Advisory Committee. Just again, to go over participation instructions, please stay muted during the presentation until it's time for discussions. We are allowing for comments to be submitted up to 30 minutes following the start of the meeting to my email address, which is klandry@everettwa.gov. We did collect public comments for this meeting leading up. Should the broadcast stop at any one point in time, please use the call-in number that's provided on the agenda. This can also be found on our website. This will be rebroadcast on the Everett channel and available on our web pages. Our recording from the April 20th meeting is currently available on the website. A 5-day comment period will follow our actions on the priority needs for COVID, and that will then go to the City Council. following the committee's recommendation. A separate comment period will be set for the 2020 Consolidated Plan and 2020 Annual Action Plan. Oh, wrong way. So just some definitions for us. The first is, of course, one I hope that we're all familiar with, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. They are the agency that allocates our federal funding. The next is our Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG funds. This is the main funding source that we receive. This is for public infrastructure, public services, some rehabilitation housing work, and public utilities, I believe. And then next are our Home Investment Partnership Funds. As a reminder, the City of Everett participates as a member in the consortium with Snohomish County, and so our home dollars come from a small percentage of Snohomish County's home dollars. Entitlement jurisdiction is an entity or a municipality such as City of Everett that is entitled to receive funding from HUD. Our consolidated plan is our 5-year long-range federal guiding document that guides our federal spending. An annual action plan is a year that supports the goals that are set forth in the consolidated plan. And tenant-based rental assistance is a term for assistance that's given for supplementing market rate apartments, and tenant-based rental assistance is given to an individual, so it moves with an individual and is not necessarily based on a unit. So, regarding the CARES funding that has been provided to the City of Everett, on March 20th, the $2 trillion Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, was passed into law to provide economic and financial support during the nation's COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Everett, as an entitlement jurisdiction, is slotted to receive approximately $534,000 in CARES CDBG funds. Funds must be used to fund activities that prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. The guidance from HUD at this time is limited. However, they have allowed for a shortened public process period, and this is to allow us to get funds out as soon as possible. They have also waived a 15% cap that is typically applied to public service dollars. Activities that do support, public service activities that do support COVID-19 efforts must still comply, though, with the regulations that are found under 24 CFR 570-201E. Further guidance is still expected and is pending from HUD, and we will be happy to circulate that information once we get it. So on April 10th, the community development staff recognized that we would need to do something that would allow us to understand what it was that we were really seeing as far as impacts in the community. So a short electronic survey was circulated and posted online. This was really targeted to agencies to really understand the community needs that are coming forth in response to COVID-19. From that, we were able to see, and the survey was open for about, I think, 12 days. From that, we were able to see the agencies have experienced revenue loss, staff layoffs, rising food costs, and/or procedural changes. The impacts are really centering around increased service demand, reduction in operating revenues, and disparities with telenetworking and resources. What that means is that we had some respondents that gave us information that there is a disconnect between their services and trying to connect virtually with some of the clients they serve. Respondents mainly perceived that the city of Everett should focus on housing and food. In the next two slides, you will see graphs indicating as such. So the first graph is really centered on the question of what has impacted you the most. And again, this is for agencies in relation to COVID-19. And we can see that most of our respondents gave answers in reduction in operating revenue coming in, as well as an increased service demand. There's much less impact as far as laying off staff, forced closure, or decreased service demand. The number one perception for the city's response is really overwhelmingly focused on housing security. Food was a second in that, with only 7 votes for that. And then it also included healthcare, homelessness, and we did not have any responses on crime. We bring this up because the city's priorities for the 2020 consolidated plan and 2020 annual action plan are different than the ones that we see here in response to COVID. So we want to make sure that the priority needs that we're identifying for COVID are specific to the response to the COVID crisis that is currently going on. Because of this, staff is asking that the committee consider additional criteria for when we go out for a notice of funding availability. For our new committee members, a notice of funding availability is given when we open up applications for agencies to apply for the funds that we have available. These criteria are in addition to the standard regulations that HUD has for agencies to participate with CDBG funds.
Oh.
The first criteria that we see is a criteria that supports the mayoral directive on a community engagement, equity, and inclusion, and is asking that the priorities align to benefit Everett's diversity and focus on low-income households and underrepresented community members, such as communities of color, immigrant, non-English speaking households. Additionally, a second criteria that staff would recommend for the committee to consider is that agencies must be able to show a loss of operating revenue or increased service demand or staff reduction in response to COVID-19. The staff recommendation for needs are to establish housing security as a priority need for these funds. This is in accordance with the 2020 city priorities that the mayor has put out, as well as the priorities that were established by the committee back in August for the 2020 funds. And this is to maintain housing security as a priority for response to COVID-19. Specifically, when we're talking about housing security, we're talking about activities that focus on direct support, such as financial assistance, emergency shelter, or legal aid. The second priority that we recommend is food security. And this is really in response to the direct input regarding the COVID-19 impacts and adding food security and access as a priority for the response to COVID-19. Activities should focus on food security for unsheltered persons and low-income households at 80% area median income or below. And for that then, and then we have one more, sorry. Again, to go back over it, just as a summary, the CARES Act is really financial relief under community development block grant funds. The purpose is, again, to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. City of Everett has approximately $534,000 to allocate to this effort. And this is in addition to the funds that we talked about on our April 20th meeting, which was the $500,000 to support economic development activities. So that then concludes the priority needs portion of the meeting. And the second, we had the reallocation of home funds. And so I'm going to bring back up my screen, and I'm going to share our Excel sheet instead. So on this, we see that what we have are the 2020 federal projects that were provided to City Council. These were funding recommendations that were initially set in the November meetings, as well as ones that were revisited in February of 26th. And I bring that sheet back up just to refresh our committee members' memories that were part of that meeting at that time. That is when we found out that we had one agency that was unable to move forward. And so we reallocated funds at that time, also accounted for an increase in funds from what was initially projected. And so that's here if we need to reference it. However, if we go back to what we're doing today, what we're really talking about is that we've had a project that is unable to move forward with home funds. And so we would like to request that the committee consider allocating these dollars instead to tenant-based rental assistance in the amount of $281,562. And so I'm going to just leave that there for right now. I'll pull this back up. And then I'm going to share our PowerPoint presentation again. Oh, and I apologize. It's put me at the beginning again. So let's just take a quick walk down memory lane, get through this again. Okay. And so now we're on our 2020 consolidated plan and 2020 annual. At this time, no amendments are necessary to these plans as they have not yet been accepted by HUD. So this is different than what we did at our last meeting. Our last meeting, we had to amend our plans because they had already been approved by HUD. At this time, these plans have still been in draft form. And so we don't have to amend anything. We're just adding to it. And to go back over it, our priorities that were established back in August of last year for these funds are housing. And that's really, we're focusing on creation of new units. I do have to say that that is limited just to home dollars. You cannot create new units with CDBG dollars. Housing financial assistance, housing rehabilitation, and legal aid for housing mediation. Services with a main focus on mental health services. That was not prohibitive to other services, but it was really one of the priorities that came forward in community input that we gathered at the time. Homelessness efforts and crime prevention. So as far as 2020 plans go, staff recommends that the committee consider adding disaster response procedures in light of what's happened with our current crisis, and adding a goal of economic development to the 2020-2024 consolidated plan. At this time, we did not have either one of these goals included in the consolidated plan, and so we're asking that these be added. And then also adding disaster response procedures and COVID-19 goals and activities to the 2020 annual action plan. In doing this will allow for future uncommitted funds or unused funds to be allocated towards activities that directly support COVID-19 relief efforts. Okay, and at that time, I am through. Chair Atkins, back to you.
All right, so are we now doing committee discussion?
Yes.
All right. Who's missing?
Everybody's here.
Okay, everybody's here. Then I'm going to just call your name, and if you have any questions or comments for staff, or just want to pose a a comment or question to the committee, please feel free to do so. I don't have anything, so Vicky Doorway.
Yes, I have something. I do have a question, most likely for staff, in regards to the COVID priorities of housing and food. It looked like in the survey respondents that healthcare was a close request for priorities to food. And I'm just wondering why only food was chosen or why healthcare was taken out of the consideration for the priorities.
I can respond to that. At this time, we need to evaluate also what other entities are doing in response to this. We need to make sure that we're not overlapping too much. So for housing security and for food, we felt that this was these two efforts we could confidently go in and not overlap with what other agencies are doing. But that's up for, I guess, also discussion. Becky, do you have anything else to add?
Am I on mute? No, just to say that we typically have not funded healthcare through CDBG programs, and we feel that there's other community support and efforts in the healthcare arena, given what we know other agencies are doing, if that helps answer the question.
Yes, that does. Thank you. That's all of my questions or comments.
Hello?
Charles?
Sorry, for some reason, you guys weren't able to hear me. Okay, Greg Campbell.
The rental-based assistance, is that going to be administered by the county or the city or both? And if so, what's the name of the organization that's doing that?
The tenant-based rental assistance program would be implemented through an agency. So the city would not create its own, what we call TBRA program. Typically, we would see who the county also has a TBRA program, and if the city is okay with the agency they select, then oftentimes, and we may do it here also, we would just tack the city's money onto that same contract, because then we save money in terms of administering. One agency is administering, but these funds would go only to Everett residents.
Okay. So how does one go about getting assistance? You know,
the agency would typically go to what the county has as a coordinated entry system. So when you call the housing resource line 211, you then are signing up in the system for housing assistance. And that's where that's where the agencies get their referrals from.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Charles?
And now we have Sue. Sue, do you have any comments? Hello?
She's on mute. There she is. No.
I'm coming. There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
The question is regarding the priority needs food security. And when we mention access as a priority for unsheltered and low income, I have one concern for at-risk populations, i.e. the elderly who are not able necessarily to get out because of this COVID. And so while income isn't necessarily a factor there. There may be people who have limited access to food and limited availability of getting out for it. Is there any way to include them even if they're not low income?
Well, as Becky McCrary, as you know, we have for several years funded the Meals on Wheels program. And I believe that program does provide to many seniors, and Kimbra, correct me if I'm wrong, seniors and elderly are a presumed group.
They're a predetermined group under HUD guidelines, which means that they're already presumed to be low income. And so part of the typical criteria with CDBG funds is that these have to go to either presumed groups or to specifically low income households that show that they have financial constraints. So seniors are already determined to be a predetermined group under HUD.
So theoretically, the Meals on Wheels program would be serving more than just low-income seniors.
Okay, I guess I was thinking about the population who are either unable to or afraid to go to grocery stores. And
Mm-hmm.
so while they may not be low income and they may not normally use a program, that getting resources may still be a problem unique to COVID for that group.
It would have to be an agency. Again, I think I think that Homage is really the lead in the community on services for senior, including food. I'm not sure that there's any other way to distribute.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay, I just thought that there was a unique need presented. And then I have one other quick question on the last part of the staff recommendations. You talk about housing and food security and economic developments adding those to the action plan. What specifically were they thinking of in terms of the economic developments? That's a little fuzzy for me what you meant there.
Yes. Go ahead. So the economic development addition to the 2020 annual action plan is really going to first accommodate the economic development CARES grants that are going out right now in order for us to continue that effort for any. So we're also what we're also saying is that we're about to run into a new program year on July 1st. And so for us to be able to utilize under the CARES Act, we were able to use 2019 funds, which we're currently in, and also 2020 funds. So for us to be able to utilize any uncommitted 2020 funds, we have to add the activity that you approved on the April 20th hearing to the 2020 annual action plan. You've already added it to the 2019 annual action plan, but we would need to add it also to the 2020 annual action plan. So this is to support that prior effort.
And that is just to put the goal in there. It's not specifying it as a specific annual priority. That would come back through the committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Slightly less fuzzy.
Slightly.
That's all, Charles.
All right. Demba, are you on the call?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
All right. Do you have anything?
Thank you. I do. Yeah. Just to expand on Sue's questions. Typically, the agencies that benefit from this kind of grants are people who are familiar with this process and these benefits, right? More or less people who have access. So
Correct.
what method or what criteria are we using to reach out to communities that we call invisible communities, especially the immigrant communities that would not typically come out, especially in situations like this? What are we doing to reach out to those people, make sure that they can get access to these benefits as well? Thank you.
Kipra?
That's a great question. So what right now, I think that what we've done is typically we're doing our notices in languages other than English. So that's a first attempt for us to try and expand a little bit. But we really need to try and also utilize a lot of we're also kind of working in a different realm right now, right? Where a lot of things, unfortunately, are dependent on virtual circulation of information. But I think what we're going to need to do is be very mindful of also the existing networks that we have right now. So one of the things that we've been doing is providing as much information online as possible, providing things in our social networking. We've already done stuff in the Herald, but what we'll probably need to do is ask our committee members beyond just the Citizen Advisory Committee, but we have a diversity board as well. And we have some other constituents that we can try and work with, some other community partners, and trying to circulate the information as best as possible. I think that we're operating under a different time right now where we have to be very mindful about any gaps in virtual access that we have that's out there also. So it's really going to rely on the networks that people are able to bring forward that may be in the community. And it doesn't necessarily have to be staff reaching out to organizations to get this out. It could be neighbor to neighbor. This is something that we can continue to try and push out through various platforms, but it's definitely going to be different in the current crisis that we're in right now. So also, I think that if there's any suggestions for ideas to helping to circulate things beyond just our standard process or anything like that, then I'd be happy to take suggestions on that.
And I'll just add a little bit more to that. And then through our consolidated plan process, we tried to engage other communities and other cultures in a way that we hadn't. And those are some of the, again, avenues that we will use to make sure that, and just an example, the Casino Road area, and making sure that, some of the groups down there have access to this information, and agencies or representatives that are working with them get the information so that, possibly they could make themselves in line for a grant for these needs.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend perhaps linking up with the diversity committee, because I used to serve on that board, and I know that when I left, they were doing a community outreach, trying to reach out to some communities. I know that most of the immigrant community in Everett, they are heavily in healthcare, so they are the heroes in the front line right now, and they. I know there's a lot of communities that are affected right now that are not coming forward and seeking for help. They're still working. They have families. They go to work. They're taking care of the elderly and the vulnerable in the nursing homes. So it would be good to reach out to these people and see. I know some masjids, in the Everett area. I mean, like Everett Mall, that are already providing services to these communities. So those people would be. Going through those people would be a good thing to reach out to these communities that are very, very vulnerable at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Demba.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it, Charles. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Mary Rollins, do you have anything?
Yes. Let me think about what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. So if we're giving tenant assistance, what if the tenant is in a hotel or motel room? Is that just through the determination of those agencies?
So was your question, so the tenant-based rental assistance wouldn't be for motel vouchers?
Okay.
If somebody was, there's other programs for that, but if somebody was in a motel but they had a unit that they could secure and move into, they would be able to get rental assistance if they were in the coordinated entry system.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, thank you. That's it. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Great. Ben?
Yeah, Demba, thanks again. Those were really helpful thoughts that actually helped with a question I had. I'm looking at the funding worksheet that you sent, and it totals $918,000, which is close to the full $1 million that we've been talking about dispersing. Is this, are there going to be future opportunities for applicants to request grants? And I'm asking because I'm looking at these numbers, and it seems it's kind of like what happened with the payroll protection, with the EIDL loans, kind of a land grab where first come, it just snatches all the resources up. And even as Demba was talking about some of those organizations, those groups that are really on the front line that might not have been able to get into this expedited application process. Will there be future funding opportunities for them? And because yes or no would kind of determine some of my questions about some of these public service applications.
Yeah. So Becky, would you like to go?
Sure. So the spreadsheet that you're looking at, that is 2020 CDBG funds. The $1 million for the COVID, that's separate. So the money that we're moving forward for this COVID specific needs for both the economic development, the small business grants, and these public service grants that we have these different COVID needs for, they're separate pots of money. So we're showing you the spreadsheet. That was your funding recommendation for the 2020 funds. That's still the same, except for that we're asking you to take the money that the project that couldn't move forward to and move that into a tenant-based rental assistance program. Am I understanding your questions right?
Yeah, yes, I think I misunderstood when we were originally talking about the $500,000 CARES Act that the city was getting, as well as the additional CDBG funds that were not allocated. So I was looking at the total of the funding recommendations, thinking that this was already, yeah, I'm just kind of crossing my Excel documents at this point.
Yeah.
That clarifies it. Thank you very much.
So that means that the city's putting out about $2 million out into the community here shortly.
Very good. I guess then my clarification or the question is, would we be able to have maybe an ongoing open application process so that we're able to fund some of the organizations that are on the front line that might not have, a full-time bookkeeper or accountant who's able to, or the ear to the ground with the grant application process. So as they hear about those, they'd be able to apply without having missed the boat already.
I guess my response to that is that we believe that once we put this out, that we're going to get far more applications than we have money.
Okay.
But we will keep accepting applications until the money's used up.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Samantha, do you got anything?
No questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
All right. Susan, do you have anything?
My questions have been asked and answered. Thank you so much.
Larissa, do you have anything?
No questions and comments. Thank you.
All right. Kathy, final chance for some questions.
Yeah, so as far as reaching out to communities that might be more difficult to connect with, I'm on a email list with over 400 other individuals called a local planning partnership network. And that's a series of agencies like early learning and shelters for homelessness and food. So you guys may have heard of that already, but that would be a great network to reach out to spread the word for any surveys or applications.
Excellent. Yeah, if we could get that information, that would be great.
Yep. That's all.
All right, with that, I believe, unless anyone else has any further questions, I am going to end discussion on the past three presentations presented by a wonderful staff. So now I do need a motion and a second to open the public hearing for this meeting. Do I have a motion?
Mary Rollins, I motion to open for public discussion.
Demba Balde, I second the motion to open public discussions.
All right. The motion has been moved and seconded. So with that, I will now call a roll call vote. I, Charles Atkins, vote yes. Vicky Dorway?
Yes. Yes.
Greg Campbell?
Yes.
Sue Johnson?
Yes.
Demba Balde?
Yes.
Mary Rollins?
Yes.
Ben Breeden?
Yes.
Samantha Hassan?
Yes.
Susan Mosshart?
Yes.
Larissa Knopp?
Yes.
Kathy Lynott?
Yes.
All right, and with your vote, the public hearing is now open. Would staff please read any written public comment into the record?
Yes. So again, I just want to revisit the 4 that we received at the last hearing, because I think that they apply a little bit more to the priorities that we're setting today. So again, we had two comments that came from outside the city of Everett that focused on housing vouchers and housing for the disabled. And then we had 2 entities inside the city of Everett that focused on legal aid and operating assistance and financial housing assistance. Since those 4 comments, we received one more, and this is from Volunteers of America's Dispute Resolution Center, and they would like to have us, they said, please consider the Homeless Prevention Program at VOA Western Washington Dispute Resolution Center for receiving funding to provide rental assistance to our vulnerable residents. Furthermore, they added that they received over 120 referrals this month for rental assistance, and the average needed per household is ranging from $700 to $2,500. Most households are seeking help with March and April rent. So again, this is kind of consistent with some of the priority needs that we had seen prior, but those were all the comments that were received up until this point. Thank you, Charles.
All right, and with that, I now need a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Vicky Dorway, I motion to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
This is Ben Breeden, and I second that motion.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. I am now going to proceed with a roll call vote. Charles Adkins, yes. Vicky Dorway,
Yes.
Greg Campbell,
Yes.
Sue Johnson,
Yes.
Demba Balde,
Yes.
Mary Rollins,
Yes.
Ben Breeden,
Yes.
Samantha Hassan,
Yes.
Susan Mosshart,
Yes.
Larissa Knopp,
Yes.
Kathy Lynott.
Yes.
All right. With your vote, we have now closed the public hearing. Is there any comments or questions with regards to the public comments?
Greg Campbell. Becky, are we going to be kept abreast of the requests that will be coming in for these monies? Hello?
My mic was off. I apologize for that. Yes, we, as Kemper said, we will be putting a notice of funding availability out saying that we are accepting applications for these grants. And we're going to get these applications in, and then we're going to take it through the same process that you usually do, in that we will evaluate the applications against the priorities, and then we'll bring them forward to you, and then we'll have to take them to council for final approval.
I thought so. Thank you for
Yes.
clarifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Any further questions or comments?
Yes, Charles Demba here. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Becky, I was just, can we be notified, and can the committee members be notified when applications are open? You're on mute.
I should just leave it on. No, absolutely. We, whenever we do a mass mailing with our notice of funding availability, we have all of the committee members on there as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Mary Rollins here.
Mary, please proceed.
Thank you. What is the timeline? I know that we were able to truncate some of that, but what do you perceive to be the timeline when we get approval from City Council?
Well, City Council is going to approve the amendments. They're going to take action on the amendments that you forwarded them from your 420 meeting, and hopefully they will approve it. But that approves the money to be used for COVID-19 related impacts. That's on the 29th, and we will be launching the small business program there shortly after, and then we hope within the following week we will be able to get this money, the notice out to the public. So we want it to make it a very short time period. I hope within a week of the small business grant program goes out.
So all of this money should be dispersed by the end of May? Would that be accurate, or later?
It will be. We're hoping to get through all of the process, because remember, we got to bring them all back to you guys. We're going to do our best by the end of May, first part of June.
Okay, thank you. I know it's a lot to get through all of the different levels of process that need to be done. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Going once, going twice, going thrice. With that, I'm going to close committee discussion on this. We are now going to move on to the action part of our agenda. So I will need a motion and a second on the CARES priority needs. Do I hear a motion?
Sue Johnson, I move that the action on the CARES priority needs be adopted as written.
Mary Rollins, I'll second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. I'm now going to proceed with a roll call vote. I, Charles Atkins, vote yes. Vicky Dorway?
Yes.
Greg Campbell?
Yes.
Sue Johnson?
Yes.
Dimba Baldet,
Yes.
Mary Rollins,
Yes.
Ben Breeden,
Yes.
Samantha Hassan,
Yes.
Susan Mosshart,
Yes.
Larissa Knopp,
Yes.
Kathy Lina.
Yes.
All right, and with that, there were no votes, so that passes. Now I will need a motion and a second on the reallocation of 2020 home dollars.
Sue Johnson, I move that the $281,562 be reallocated to the tenant-based rental assistance plan as written.
Demba
Mary
Balde, I second that motion.
All right, I heard Dimba first, so he gets credit for seconding. The motion has been moved and seconded, so I will now proceed with a roll call vote. I, Charles Atkins, vote yes. Vicky Dorway,
Yes.
Greg Campbell,
Yes.
Sue Johnson,
Yes.
Demba Balde,
Yes.
Mary Rollins,
Yes.
Ben Breeden,
Yes.
Samantha Hassan,
Yes.
Susan Mosshart,
Yes.
Larissa Knopp,
Yes.
Kathy Lina.
Yes.
All right, and seeing no votes, that passes unanimously. The final thing we need to take action on today is the priorities for the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan and the 2020 Annual Action Plan. Do I hear a motion and a second for said plan?
Sue Johnson, I move that the priorities for the 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan be amended to add disaster response as written.
Now, does anyone have any opposition to that? Going once, going twice?
Sorry, Charles, it's Mary Rollins. Opposition to her.
The amendment.
Okay, because it wasn't seconded, so are you asking for, what are you asking for?
I'm asking before we move forward if anyone has any issues with the inclusion of the disaster recovery portion.
Okay, I see.
Do we need a second before we have discussion? Just a point of clarification. And then I would have a question just because do we need to review that response procedure? I did just out of curiosity as written.
As the chair, I am just using the chair's prerogative to have discussion right now, because if the motion is seconded, we do have to go through the process to actually vote upon it. And if there are adjustments that need to be made, I would prefer if we didn't vote on it and instead just talked about it right now.
Okay, then my question is, did the motion was to accept the addition of the annual action plan, including the disaster response procedures as written. Did we see the disaster response procedures? Is that our obligation to review those? Just a point of clarification, if we're motioning to endorse those.
Would staff be able to comment?
Yeah, I can comment on that. This is Kimbra. The disaster response procedures were included in the amendments that you guys took action on the 20th. Really what they do though is it includes, we made changes to the citizen participation plan that reduce public comment and public notice periods so that we can allocate funds faster in an emergent environment or in a disaster response. For the plans themselves then, what we've done is we are doing, it's going to it's the same as what was voted on prior, which is that should uncommitted funds and the committee decide COVID-19 relief efforts or for other disaster response efforts, then that can happen expeditiously. So it doesn't have to go through the full public process.
Cool.
Are there any additional concerns from the committee?
Mary Rollins here. So my understanding when we moved when we went through this process on the 20th was that this would be embedded going forward. It's not going to just apply to what we're working on now, because there were no disaster and emergency kind of coordinating aspects to this. Is that correct? Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, yes, and also for 2020 specifically, that's why the 2020 annual action plan will focus on COVID efforts, because we anticipate that, of course, the effects from the current crisis will extend into the 2020 program year. However, the amendments that you did prior, especially the ones, I think that what you're referencing is what we also put in the citizen participation plan, is not necessarily in response to COVID, but more so any disaster or declaration of emergency that we may be under.
Right. That's what I meant. And I didn't know if that was more in line with what Ben was getting at or not, but that's what I think a lot of organizations are putting these processes in place so we don't have to start over from scratch the next time something happens. So it's not just COVID related. It could be an earthquake. It could be whatever the emergency is. Okay, great.
Yes,
thanks.
that's correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sue Johnson, so my understanding then is that it just codifies this to include all the way through 2024 any other contingencies in the future.
Any other contingencies that are
disaster related?
Yes, yes. And really what this means, though, this is really only in particular to our process when it comes to the public comment. Our typical 30-day process is reduced down to 7. Our typical 15-day notice period is reduced down to 5. Everything still has to come to the committee for allocation and funding recommendations. So I just want to make that clear also, is that when we're talking about the disaster preparedness and response times, we're really focusing on simplifying the process so that the funds get out faster.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further comment? Any further comment? Going once? Going twice? Going thrice? Okay. Would someone like to second Sue's motion?
Mary Rollins, I'll second.
All right. The motion has been moved and seconded. I will now proceed with a roll call vote. I, Charles Atkins, vote yes. Vicky Dorway.
Yes.
Greg Campbell.
Yes.
Sue Johnson.
Yes.
Dembo Baudet.
Yes.
Mary Rollins.
Yes.
Ben Breeden.
Yes.
Samantha Hassan.
Yes.
Susan Mosshart.
Yes.
Larissa Knott.
Yes.
Kathy Lina.
Yes.
All right, with that, we have voted to recommend that. So we are now on to the announcement of committee recommendation comment period with Kimbra.
That's just to follow up and again say that, so as far as your priorities that you just set, this will go out for a brief comment period. This is part of that disaster planning that we just talked about. So the comment period is going to be 7 days for people to provide comment on priority needs that you just set in response to COVID-19. We will still go through our typical 30-day comment period for the 2020 plans. And so then of course then the action on the COVID relief funds will then follow the calendar that Becky talked about earlier. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Now,
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes.
I'd like to add just a few things. So keeping this in mind, as soon as we get a firm schedule on when the notice of application is going out, and when the committee will need to meet and when we could get this through council, we'll share that information with you, so that we can again get your availability. Thank you.
All right. With that, we are now on to the hardest part of the day. So I do need a motion to adjourn and a second to that motion.
Sue Johnson, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Yes, Demba Balde, I'll second the motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right. Any opposition? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Great. We're adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Everyone have a nice day now.
Thank you. You
Thanks,
too.
Steph.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.